So, with the release of Rebel Moon Part 2, The Scargiver, I now want to sit down and go through all of Zack Snyder's filmography. Zack Snyder, one of the most, I want to say, divisive directors out there. A director that people can't seem to agree on. You either love him and think he is one of the best visionary directors we have today, a guy who has killed it in the action genre and the superhero genre, who has made banger after banger after banger. Or you're somebody else who just thinks he's kind of a bad filmmaker, who makes bad movie after bad movie after bad movie, and that is the opinion of a lot of people at the moment, because he just released a pretty bad movie in Rebel Moon. So because of all that, I, as a fan of Zack Snyder, but also somebody who has criticized some of his work, I want to go through everything that he has made and rank them from worst to best and give my opinion and talk about my favorite films from him, movies that I absolutely adore, and other movies that I wish I could erase from my mind because they're terrible. So here we go, you know how these videos work. Before I get into it, please make sure to subscribe. Please make sure to like this video. Leave a comment down below letting me know that you did those things. Turn on notifications, and please enjoy. Let's get right into this. Zack Snyder's newest movie, Rebel Moon Part 2, is easily the worst thing that he has ever created. This movie is a pile of donkey dog shit. And yes, I said donkey dog shit. What does that mean? I don't know. And neither did Zack Snyder when he was writing this script. He had no idea, I think, what he was doing with this one. This is an absolute disaster of a movie. It is a Part 2 that was clearly designed to be the third act of what was one movie at one point, combined with the Part 1, but was split apart because Zack Snyder's runtime was getting very, very long, and he wanted to do a director's cut, essentially, of this movie. So what you get instead is a movie that rehashes everything that happened in the first part of this movie. It is the same conflict, the same characters doing the same thing. We're defending this village from these evil Nazi dudes that we actually beat and killed in the first movie, but they're back and they're alive, so we have to do the same thing again. That happens, and then the movie ends in the same place that the Part 1 ended. It doesn't move the story forward at all. The little bits of cool world building the movie does is just not sufficient enough to really give this movie enough steam or enough power to really make it worth watching. The slow motion action scenes just become so redundant and so overly used that they're just not interesting at all. The color palette of this movie is dark, dry, gray, which sometimes with Snyder works. This one, it didn't, when it's this big explosive world that you want to be engaged with. It's something like Avatar, where that world is so beautiful, you want to be there. This world is so ugly, I never want to see it again. You have uninteresting characters, bad exposition dumps, and just overall, this is a very, very bad movie, and it's unfortunate because I really wanted Rebel Moon to be great. And slightly better than Rebel Moon Part 2 is Rebel Moon Part 1. This movie has all of the same problems as Part 2. I just think the opening act of this film and how it gets into this world makes it a bit more watchable than the first part. You get this world that at its core, the expansive world and the lore here is somewhat interesting. It's interesting enough to really tell a story, and they just decide to tell a story with some of the most uninteresting people and characters you could possibly tell it with, like the main character, Cora, who is just your basic, brooding, strong female character who does not do anything to go beyond that structure that has been done to death. The village being defended here is not interesting at all. The world, it never expands enough for the audience to get gripped with it. It has all the same problems I listed in Part 2, and the movie ends in a place that does kind of say, hey, the next one, we're going to go bigger, better, and we're going to expand all this stuff, and then obviously we know it didn't. So this Part 1 is also just not a good movie. It falls here at number 10. Legend of the Guardian. This is a movie that admittedly I have not seen in a long time, but I remember absolutely hating this movie as a kid. This is a movie that never clicked with me. Now, Legend of the Guardian is a big CGI movie about all these owls, and Hugo Weaving's in it, and he's great. This is a movie that's based on a fantasy book. It's about families. It's about epic battles. It's about a bunch of different fantasy tropes that exist within this world of owls and CGI-ness, and it's a movie that just never connected with me. I don't remember a lot about it, so I'm putting it here to be safe. A good YouTuber would have rewatched it. But I'm a great YouTuber, so I don't have to rewatch it. Fuck it, I'm just gonna put it here anyway. If you love this movie, I'm sorry, it's just not very memorable to me, and I just remember absolutely hating this movie as a kid. I thought the CGI was bad, but yet again, Hugo Weaving's in it. I don't like Hugo Weaving. Sucker Punch is a movie that I have watched relatively recently, about a year ago, and this is a movie that I also hated as a kid, and I still don't love now, but I think this movie is a little bit better than the movies I put ahead of it, because it at least was Zack Snyder kind of at his best when it comes to that visual slow-mo action. I enjoy a lot of the action set pieces in this movie. I enjoy a lot of what this movie has to offer, and I would be interested in seeing that Snyder cut of this film that's apparently out there. This movie's relatively simple. It's just a movie about a crew of these badass women who have to fight bad guys, and it's, you know, it goes on a Zack Snyder type tale. It's a movie that has a lot of problems. Its pacing's not good. It probably lasts a little too long. And here's the difference. Listen, when I say I want to see the extended cut of this, but then I say it lasts too long, what I mean is that in a movie that's 2 hours long with bad pacing, it could feel like 3 hours. But in a 3-hour movie with good pacing, it could feel like an hour and a half. So I feel like the longer version might actually be better. Something like Napoleon, I've said it before. The Napoleon movie was 2.5 hours long, but it felt like 5 hours long. And apparently there's a 3.5 hour, 4-hour cut out there that will probably feel shorter than the shorter cut because it will be paced better than the actual movie was. This is one of those cases. I just don't think the pacing in this movie is that great at all, but it is an enjoyable movie. I think it's better, at least, than the previous films.
Knowing what the cards were by the way they held their eyes.
Army of the Dead is the first film that Zack Snyder made after the whole DC controversy and everything that happened there. He goes to Netflix and he makes this big zombie movie that takes place in Las Vegas, which has been overrun by this crazy horde of zombies, and we follow this ragtag group of characters led by Dave Bautista, Ella Purnell, and a bunch of other entertaining people, and they just have to go and sort of break into this vault and steal some stuff. It is a heist movie built into a zombie movie, and it is good. It's a good movie. I have issues with this movie. At times, it's just not very fun. It's not entertaining. But when this movie's at its best, when it's the slow-mo, zombie ass-kicking action, when it's Dave Bautista being cool, when it's the characters being awesome and bouncing off each other, when it's the bank robbery stuff near the end of the film, when it's the Suicide Squad-type elements, this movie works really well. But when it's boring, when it's slow, when it's taken a while to get into the stuff you actually want to get into, it's not very interesting. When it does a deep focus on kind of like the zombies themselves and just gets away from the characters, it's not as interesting, and sometimes the film CGI a little bit too much. But that's a problem with all movies these days now, isn't it? This is one I'd actually like to see a sequel to. I'd rather see him do a follow-up to this than see him do a follow-up to Rebel Moon, and I think this is probably more likely, so yeah, we'll look forward to that. And not to stop with Army of the Dead, we also have Dawn of the Dead, the first movie Zack Snyder directed, and the first big zombie movie he made of the two that he's done. Dawn of the Dead famously was written by James Gunn, so this is a very different Zack Snyder film, since it doesn't have a lot of the dialogue and all the stuff that you kind of get with these Zack Snyder films. It doesn't really have that dark, super dark and serious tone. It's a little bit more loose and more of a James Gunny style movie than anything else. This, though, is a very solid zombie movie. It's a forgettable zombie movie. It's not one of my favorites, and it came out in a time that was definitely oversaturating the zombie market. You had a bunch of different stuff coming out then, but this movie is great. You have a great lead here with Sarah Polley, who I think is awesome in this movie. You have a very simple plot about a zombie outbreak and a bunch of survivors coming together. You have a bunch of different drama that happens between all of that, and this movie has a good thriller vibe to it. It's fun, it's entertaining, it's dark when it needs to be, and overall, this is a solid movie. It's got some good horror elements in it, too, and overall, yet again, I always say with this movie, it's like Zack Snyder's forgotten film, only because every time I think of this movie, I always think it's a James Gunn movie. It's just where my mind goes, but it is a Zack Snyder movie, and it's solid, and it has no connection to Army of the Dead, which is completely fine. Now, Batman v Superman. Now, listen, I'm going to be talking about the ultimate cut of this movie. I'm not talking about the theatrical cut, although I do think that is fine as well. We are talking about the ultimate cut of BVS. Now, when BVS was announced, it was the most excited I had ever been for a movie. Batman and Superman on the same screen, battling it out, fighting it out. We heard that it was going to be like the Dark Knight Returns, which is one of the greatest animated stories or comic stories that has ever been put to print. It is brilliant. An old, griddled Batman played by Ben Affleck fighting Henry Cavill, who's an awesome Superman. You were going to have Lex Luthor, who's played by Jesse Eisenberg in the movie. It was just going to be epic. Now, the movie is not as epic as we hoped it would be. It's not as great as we hoped it would be, but I am one of the biggest Batman v Superman defenders out there. And that's exactly what I'm about to do. The ultimate cut of Batman v Superman is really good. It is a political drama, a deep dive into the psyches of these characters of both Superman and Batman. You have Batman dealing with the fact that there is this alien on planet Earth that on a whim can snap and kill everybody and destroy everything, and he wants to prevent that. He wants to prevent that possibility from ever happening, an injustice-type world from ever happening. So to do that, he's come to the conclusion that he has to kill Superman. And this is a Batman that has killed now. He has fallen down a dark path. He has turned to the evil side of the coin. He is not a good Batman, he is a very bad Batman, which I was skeptical on when the movie came out. I'm still skeptical today, but part of it does work for me. So he is trying to kill Superman. You have Superman now who is adjusting to being Superman, to being this public figure who lives in this world, who has this responsibility to protect all of Earth, but also has to understand that the destruction that lays in his path of saving people is also horrible. Like, people die when he's just being Superman because he is such a powerful alien. So there's this big political thriller in this movie between characters like Batman Batman and Lex Luthor, who are trying to figure out how we're going to deal with this super powerful force, this force of nature that cannot be contained, and then Superman trying to understand how he can convince these people that he's good and he's never going to turn on them. And those forces all come to a head, and you have the Batman v Superman fight, which is orchestrated by a Lex Luthor. A Lex Luthor that people hate. I actually don't hate Jesse Eisenberg's thing here. It's very not Lex Luthor-y. He's really playing like the Riddler in this movie. It's like, I say all the time, it's the best Riddler performance I think we've ever gotten, because that's what he's playing. He's playing the Riddler. But I enjoy the character. I think the character was smart. I think the way that he schemed everything that happened in the movie, specifically in the Ultimate Cut, where you actually get to see the scheme, and got Batman and Superman the fight. He got Batman the kryptonite, and naturally these two came together, and it happened the way he wanted it to happen. Batman wins, he's going to kill Batman. It's just that there's that morality that was not predicted between Batman realizing that Superman has more in common with humanity than everybody else. Is the Martha stuff stupid? Yes, it's really stupid. Is the big CGI Doomsday fight dumb? Yes, it is dumb. Is Wonder Woman's entrance the greatest movie in any superhero movie ever? Yes, it's one of them. I remember screaming when it happened. It's incredible. This movie has a great ending that made the intrigue for the next movie very, very fun and awesome and exciting to see how they were going to bring back certain characters. And overall, this is a movie that I enjoy a lot, and I go back and rewatch it. I think it's dark, it's brutal, it's a really good Batman movie. I just think it's a solid movie that gets way too much hate. And that brings me to the Snyder Cut. Yet again, not Justice League 2017, because that was directed by Joss Whedon. Let's just be honest here. The Snyder Cut, the movie that we waited years for. They kept saying, release the Snyder Cut, release the Snyder Cut. He kept releasing pictures of this mystery cut of this movie that nobody even knew existed. And it seemed that there was an entire different version of Justice League out there. And guess what? There was, and now we have it. Zack Snyder's Justice League. And it is a very long but very good movie. The movie that feels like the epic culmination of everything that he had built up in BVS and Man of Steel, the assembling of the Justice League by Batman, a regretful Batman who feels terrible for killing Superman, is uniting the Justice League to fight against Steppenwolf, who in this version is badass, awesome, but also a pawn of a much larger threat in Darkseid, a guy who didn't even appear in the original, but is in this one. In full force, he's here, and he is scary. Throughout the movie, we get emotional introductions to characters like the Flash and Cyborg, who is a huge standout in the movie. You get all these characters coming together and interacting in much better ways than they had in the original. You get great battles with Steppenwolf, a great quest to kind of find these mother boxes, an awesome final fight, the resurrection of Superman, which works so much better in this version. You get the great black suit. The final fight is great. The defeating of Steppenwolf is awesome. You get Darkseid teased at the end. You get Joker, Jared Leto's Joker, in a scene that, in my opinion, redeemed his entire terrible performance in Suicide Squad. He's so much better in this scene. It's a great scene with him and Ben Affleck. This whole movie was so great to have at the time. It felt so good to watch this, and it's mind-blowing how much they destroyed this movie with the theatrical cut in 2017. It just blows my mind to this day. Zack Snyder's Justice League is great. The Snyder Cut was an awesome experience, the whole process of getting it released, and I'm so glad it exists, and it's Zack Snyder really kind of at his best with a movie like this. I think Man of Steel is one of, if not the best Superman movie ever. I said it. Henry Cavill is my favorite person who's ever played the role. I think he is Superman, both visually and just who he is in real life. He just has that energy, that vibe. And Man of Steel was essentially taking the character of Superman and trying to bring him down to us, to humanize him and to make him as real as possible, similar to what Nolan did with the Dark Knight trilogy. And I know a lot of people did not want that. They wanted classic, fun, comic-y Superman, which I'm sure we're going to get next year with James Gunn's movie. But I enjoy the realism. I enjoy the real storytelling. And this is what we got. We got a very ground-based Superman story about this guy who has not revealed himself to the world yet as Superman and is dealing with the fact of, how do I tell these people that I'm a god? How do I deal with that, and how are they going to react? And then guess what? He doesn't have to do it. It does it for him, because here comes Zod, played by Michael Shanahan, who's one of the best villains I've ever seen in a comic book movie. Zod is intimidating in this movie, but there's an understanding to him. This man who had lost his world and felt like it was the fault of everybody else, and they didn't listen to him, and now he has to bring it back on Earth and destroy everybody. And he clashes with Kal-El, who is, fallen in love with humanity and doesn't want to see them destroyed, but he's Kryptonian, so there's that divide there. And it's such a great movie, such a great final battle that people get so mad about. Oh, they destroyed the city, so many people died. It's two gods fighting to save the planet. What do you expect to happen? Like, that shit's gonna happen. It's the sacrifice of these movies. I think the opening of this movie is great. The whole Krypton scene, I think, is utterly perfect, and they just had the best cast here to play some of these characters. Kevin Costner doesn't get enough credit playing Clark's dad, playing the dad of Superman, who knew his son was a god, but didn't know how to, or didn't really know how to explain to his son that he couldn't reveal it. There's a great scene in this movie between Clark and his dad after the bus scene, where Clark saved all these students from this bus that was going underwater, and the dad, he asks his dad, what was I supposed to do? Let him drown? And the dad goes, you know what? In a world where I will eventually see you getting studied on and picked apart in a lab, and they might use your power for evil, maybe you should have just let him do it. Maybe revealing yourself is more dangerous. It creates this sort of moral conversation in this movie about power and the revelation of power in humanity, and it's so much deeper than 99% of superhero movies go, and it creates such a more engaging story and a better story and a plot, a better script to sink your teeth into. There are some real moral questions being asked in this story about Superman and how the real world would react to that. Now, this movie isn't perfect. There's some scenes where I don't love the CGI. There's some other stuff in the movie with characters that I don't love. I've never been the biggest fan of Amy Adams' version of Lois Lane, but I love the ending of this movie. I love the dilemma that Superman has with Zod at the end. I love the music. Hans Zimmer gives one of the greatest scores ever, and he doesn't get a lot of credit for this one. He gets a lot of credit for other stuff, but not really this one. Man of Steel is a phenomenal movie. I've never understood the hate for it. I think it's one of the best superhero movies we've gotten in recent memory, and it's incredible. Go watch Man of Steel. But there are two movies that Zack Snyder has made that are a little bit better. 300 is my introduction to Zack Snyder. I had never seen any one of his movies, and then I had watched 300 because it was like the most viral thing of my childhood. And watching this movie as a kid might have been traumatic, but it was also the greatest experience of my life because manly Spartans being badasses and fighting those nasty Persians in slow-mo, gruesome, bloody action. It's awesome. This movie kicks ass, man. This is a simple movie. It's a historical movie about the Peloponnesian War where the Persians were invading Greece and they were coming to a head with these 300 Spartans at this one crossing, and the 300 Spartans had to hold the Persians long enough to give the Greeks a chance to win. It's a great historical moment in the actual history books, and it makes for an epic, epic, epic movie. We follow King Leonidas, who is this badass leader of men, and he takes the 300 Spartans over, and this movie has such a unique visual style that only Zack Snyder could capture. It's truly beautiful. The slow motion is awesome. The fight scenes are great. The lines in this movie, goddamn, some of the most badass things ever written and performed on screen.
Spartans, lay down your weapons!
Persian! Come and get them!
This movie has an awesome ending, an awesome final fight, and a very underrated sequel that not a lot of people talk about. Snyder didn't direct it. I like the sequel. I would love to see Snyder make a follow-up, a third movie in this trilogy. I think that would be cool. Or direct his, I know he wrote a script for a 300 sequel that would be, unconnected. It would be kind of like a futuristic love story or something. I'm down for it. Let's do whatever. More stuff like this would be great. 300 is an epic, epic movie. That's all you really need to know. This is Sparta, baby. Like, come on, it's great.
Come gather round, people, wherever you roam.
Watchmen is my favorite movie from Snyder, and it's one of my favorite movies ever. It's one of my favorite comic book movies ever. I think it is nearly a perfect comic book film. Watchmen, of course, is an adaptation of a novel, and it's an adaptation of a story that a lot of people hold deep into their hearts. It's a very complicated sort of political study of superheroes and their role in this world that's about to be destroyed by nuclear bombs, that's going to be destroyed by the Cold War. That's about to be not so cold, and you get this unique group of characters, many of which are super powerful, like a Superman-type character in Dr. Manhattan, this guy who has the power to pretty much destroy anything and everyone on the planet, and the conversations of whether or not he should use that power and how he should use it are all a part of this movie. This unique group of characters like Owlman, who's so awesome, and Rorschach, and then, of course, Ozymandias, who ends up being the villain and is one of the best villains ever, and how those three characters are all kind of thirds of the Batman personality. They're all sort of kind of like that Batman. Rorschach being that detective, that nastiness in him. Owlman being, Owlman being kind of like a part of that. Ozymandias being the billionaire playboy and the strategist, and they all sort of connect into being sort of a Batman-type character. Ozymandias, through the scheming and the plans that he makes in this movie, is terrifying, and he's performed so well. The fight scenes are tight. The visual style is amazing. That opening scene with Jeffrey Dean Morgan as the comedian, the fight scene is so, so good, which goes right into the Bob Dylan song. Wow, the opening of this movie's good. The final act of this movie is absolutely insane. This fight in, like, this pyramid structure with Ozymandias, who's just such a badass character. It's unbelievable. How it connects to Dr. Manhattan, how they lose in this movie. These characters lose, but for some reason it's still kind of a victory. It yet again opens that same moral argument that Zack Snyder sort of makes in Man of Steel of, like, sacrifice, and what has to be sacrificed for the greater good of humanity. And then it poses that question to humanity, to the audience. Hey guys, do you think what Ozymandias did was right or wrong? Do you think the sacrifice that he made for the greater good, do you think it was just completely and utterly disastrous and wrong, or do you think he had a point? And he presents that. He doesn't tell the audience what to think, he just presents that moral argument, and it makes for a much more interesting movie to engage with. It's not as black and white, it's not as simple. It's a very interesting story, and they change it from the book. I know a lot of people wanted that giant fucking squid, and that's not what you get, and I cannot understand why people complain about that, because the giant squid is dumb. It's dumb, guys. It's stupid. It's really, really stupid. And what's done here, I think, works a lot better. Using the powers of Dr. Manhattan to destroy the world and blame it on him. That's cinema, baby. That's a great, great plot line. That's an awesome twist. And this is an awesome movie that I don't think should ever be redone. I don't think we need a Watchmen remake. I know we got the TV show that was kind of more of a sequel to Watchmen, the original story of Watchmen, more so than a remake, and I think we could leave it at that. I don't think we need a sequel. I don't think we need a remake of this. I think this is a great movie that came way before its time. If this released today, it would be a massive hit, but because it released over 10 plus years, almost 15 years ago at this point, before the huge superhero craze started, I just think it didn't really connect as much with audiences, but Watchmen is easily my favorite Zack Snyder movie, and it's proof that Zack Snyder knows how to make masterful movies, and at his best, he's an incredible director, but at his worst, he is Rebel Moon, man. He's Rebel Moon. That's the video, guys. Let me know what you guys think about it down below. Leave your rankings down below. Let me know what I got right and what I got wrong. Make sure to subscribe, like this video, click on notifications to see more of my stuff. Click on the video on your screen right now, and I will see you guys on the next one.